if you're not smart, how do you write smart characters? If you're not smart yourself, how do you write a smart character?
Yeah.
Like legit. I'm just there. I remember they answered something, but even me, I was thinking about it. I was like, I don't know how you would. How would you? Because you wouldn't know what smart is because you're not smart. So,
it's like I think this is smart.
Yeah, is this smart? Is this what smart people are like?
Yeah.
It's like
Ask your smart friend.
How do you write a smart character who's like 300 IQ when you're not 300 IQ?
Yeah.
Nearly every one of my favorite stories has them. Characters who are incredibly smart. If there's anything that makes a story more interesting, it's clever solutions and smart decisions. There's something thrilling about watching a character get driven into a corner of which we're sure they'll never get themselves out of, but then seeing them escape anyway. And behind every smart character is an even smarter writer. Right? Well, here's the truth. Writers aren't always smarter than their characters. But luckily we don't need to be. It's about creating the illusion that our characters are smart. And creating illusions is something we writers are very good at. Sometimes. Before we get into how we can create this illusion of intelligence, we need to recognize that there are multiple types of intelligence. 9 to be exact, according to Howard Gardner. We'll take a look at each of these different types of intelligence, how we can write them, and what kind of character might result from each type of savviness. First up, naturalistic intelligence. People with this type of intelligence are quick to take notice of patterns and relationships to nature. Characters might employ this type of intelligence by exposing an interest in botany, zoology, herbology, or biology. But naturalistic intelligence doesn't pertain to doctors and professors only. How about mages or alchemists or simply elders who spend their days gardening?
It's a shame about the lilies, though.
They're just flowers.
Naturalistic intelligence seems like such an altruistic kind of competence, but what most intrigues me is when this intelligence falls in the wrong hands.
Hyrule derives from the Greek word hand.
Think about drug producers, rogue healers, ill-intentioned pet breeders, or characters with the ability to manipulate bodies. Yikes. Second, there's musical intelligence, which is about understanding rhythm and having a rich understanding of song structure. Characters may display this type of intelligence by speaking lyrically and gesticulating as if illustrating the rhythm of their words. Music is also known to have a hypnotizing effect which can be used to either heal or manipulate. Musical intelligence isn't limited to characters with a background in music, orchestra, or church choir. Certain ethnic populations actually have music run through their culture. Therefore, this type of intelligence may have been fostered from a very young age without ever attending a conservatory. Thirdly, logical mathematical intelligence. This is the type of intelligence most often associated with intellect, so I thought it'd be interesting to discuss some pitfalls of this type. This type of intelligence can often be detected in people who are incredibly analytical and are able to see numerical patterns really quick. However, these characters might often forget that the natural world doesn't easily let itself get broken down into numbers and equations. They might be quickly outwit by competent speakers who surprise them with a response they couldn't have predicted. Emotional situations can be hilariously awkward when inserting a character with this type of stone-hard intelligence.
That's a sharp outfit, Chan. Careful, you could puncture the hull of an Empire-class Fire Nation battleship, leaving thousands to drown at sea. Because it's so sharp.
Hey there, sweet sugar cakes. How you liking this party?
But keep in mind that with an ever-digitalizing society, hackers, mathematicians, programmers, and gamers have a frightening amount of power. Hence why this type of intelligence is often portrayed by villains.
Together, you and I will be the strongest couple in the entire world. We will dominate the Earth!
I gotta go.
Fourthly, existential intelligence. In other words, good old wisdom. This type of intelligence reveals itself as a certain capacity to understand the deeper meaning of life and philosophize on hidden truths in the human experience. Existential intelligence is often associated with mentor characters, who writers sometimes use to relay the deeper meaning of the narrative without sacrificing immersion. Existential intelligence can also be given to villains, as is often the case in young adult fiction, to mimic the clashing ideologies that can often be found in real life. Giving opposing forces this type of intelligence reflects the complexity of life and people, therefore adding dimension to a story.
If a fish lives its whole life in this river, does he know the river's destiny? No! Only that it runs on and on, out of his control. He may follow where it flows, but he cannot see the end. He cannot imagine the ocean.
Okay.
Fifthly, there's interpersonal intelligence, a type of intelligence that describes effective verbal and non-verbal communication with others. Interpersonal intelligence is of social nature, but doesn't mean that people with this type of intelligence need to be socially adept, just like you don't need to be a people person to be interested in people. Rather, interpersonal intelligence denotes an understanding of human behavior, how they react, what their body language says, how they feel, and what their motives are. It describes a certain observatory skill, the ability to consider multiple perspectives and sensitivity to temperaments and moods. Characters with this type of intelligence might be leaders, teachers, social workers, high-ranked military officers, or actors. High interpersonal intelligence is quite rare in real life, but very common in literature. I've personally noticed writers often leaning toward either writing characters with low interpersonal intelligence or high interpersonal intelligence. Maybe because writers envy effective communicators, while in reality being able to relate more to those who struggle with social interactions. I always find it ironic that as a writer I am immensely interested in people, how they think and how they behave, but I'm not even remotely a social person and I suck at everyday conversations.
Looks like it's just you and me left.
Yeah.
Books, television, games and movies are not only great sources of entertainment, but people also turn to them to learn about interpersonal communication. In Japan, they've taken it a step further. There are little reaction screens during pretty much every broadcast on TV to show the public what they decide reaction to the show is. We can't do such a thing in books, and maybe we shouldn't want to, but we have specific techniques to indicate the kind of response we'd like to elicit. Techniques like tone, subtext, and theme. Sixthly, one of my favorites, kinesthetic intelligence, the perfection of physical skills and bodily movements. We see this type of intelligence everywhere. Any story that involves fighting, close combat, martial arts, dance, sports, or activities that require fine motoric and immaculate aim. I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about the Chad trope. You know, the kind of character who is incredibly athletic but couldn't spell their own name to save their life, even though evidence has indicated that children who practice sports perform better creatively than children who don't. Just saying. As primal beings who are designed to move, kinesthetic intelligence is still very necessary despite living in a digital age. The further we go back in time, the more important physical skill becomes. The time in which a story plays out can be important to consider when rating the importance of specific know-how. Knowledge of bodily movement can be a powerful weapon, especially when someone knows more about your body than you do. Think about the damage someone could do, knowing exactly which pressure points to hit to shut you down completely. It isn't just knowing those pressure points, but hitting them with fast precision and the right amount of strength that makes it a praiseworthy skill. The same goes for illusionists. It's not only knowing the trick, but having the refined coordination and sleight of hand that makes the trick work. One slip up and the spell is broken. I find kinesthetic intelligence most interesting in small demonstrations with high stakes, like lockpicking, deactivating bombs, performing surgery, or slacklining above high ground. Seventhly, a type of intelligence writers know all too well, linguistic intelligence, the ability to think and express meaning in words. Characters with this type of intelligence may be poets, writers, journalists, news reporters, public speakers, or avid readers. The best opportunity to demonstrate your character having this type of knowledge is dialogue. If you're writing a fantasy story, your character may be a translator traveling along with other characters to help them communicate with various cultures and fantasy races. Spells often require a different language to function, which can be something one of your characters is specialized in or has to learn to complete their quest.
Invocatio, Mahorera, Sol, Grum, Modo, Teloch.
Linguistic intelligence might also play an important role in deciphering clues in mysteries or historic fiction. It's a fun one to play around with.
You don't decontaminate.
What are you even trying to say?
Number 8. Intrapersonal intelligence is demonstrated through self-awareness, self-understanding, and introspection. People with intrapersonal intelligence have a deep appreciation for the human condition and are often very sensitive. Characters exposing this type of intelligence may be philosophers, spirituals, psychologists, or counselors. To write someone who is intrapersonally intelligent requires a focus on introspection, reflection, and maybe commentary on one's own reactions and thoughts. Last but not least, visual spatial intelligence. Visual spatial intelligence is best illustrated through artistic occupations like painting, photography, climbing, and dancing. Visual spatial intelligent characters might be very adept at gauging distances and covering distances with spectacular efficiency. Incredibly handy for travelers and trekkers, but also armies. Characters might display this intelligence through map making or map reading, and selecting the best transportation methods. Other than geography in school, this type of intelligence isn't really taught. Visual spatial intelligence usually stems from experience. Maybe your character is a parkour athlete, a climber, an overlander, a military strategist, or a deep sea explorer. The 9 types of intelligence can be further reduced down to 3 categories of intelligence: experience or street smart, wisdom, and education or book smart. Experience and education can be quite easily faked. After all, someone's experience is derived from the environment you put them in and may have even designed. In fantasy and sci-fi, street smart characters often fulfill the role as guides for the audience if there's a lot to be learned about the world, a world you as the writer created. Education can be imitated by simply looking up technical terms and jargon that suits the specific education a character has had. Wisdom, however, cannot be faked, because if we simply pluck some ancient wisdom from the internet, our story will end up a cliché.
Sometimes clouds have 2 sides, a dark and light, and a silver lining in between. It's like a silver sandwich.
There's a reason Shakespeare, Hamlet, Oscar Wilde, and Rumi are popular writers that are also impossible to copy, because it's their internal wisdom that makes their writing unforgettable. You really need to have had your own unique experiences and observations from which you can draw life lessons to be shared. The only other way would be to find someone else who has a particular kind of wisdom. I always like talking to elders, my own grandparents, or even my yoga teachers to salvage some wisdom. Of course, make sure to gain their permission before sharing any of the knowledge they entrusted you with.
Maybe we haven't failed after all. That's the spirit. I can't believe that worked. I didn't even know what I was saying.
No, what you said made no sense at all.
To write a character smarter than you, start by defining the type of intelligence they possess and how that differs from your own. Interpersonal and intrapersonal intelligence, for example, are polar opposites. If this is you and the character that you're trying to write, it can be quite a challenge. However, you could use this contrast to your advantage by thinking what you would do in a specific situation and then have your character do the complete opposite. Say you're in a situation where your character has to make a good first impression on an important general to, I don't know, save the world or something casual like that. If I were in that situation, I would probably focus heavily on my own reactions, my intonation, my expressions, and what I could say. However, my interpersonal intelligent character would probably focus on how the general reacts by analyzing their body language, their intonation, their expressions, and figure out the perfect response to play off that information in a split second. Another method is to study a person who you know exhibits this type of intelligence. Talk show hosts often possess incredible intrapersonal intelligence. Polyglots are the best example of linguistic intelligence, and studying interviews with dancers or martial artists will teach you what kinesthetic intelligence means besides flashy moves.
Now water can flow or it can crash. Be water, my friend.
To write characters with knowledge in a specific field, it goes without saying that some research is required. In the age of Google, YouTube, and many other gold mines of free information, well, free in a relative manner, the world is truly at our fingertips. I personally found that conducting research for my story is retroactive. Not only am I learning more about specific subjects to make my characters more convincing, but I often discover new and even better information to explore in my story that I wouldn't have otherwise thought of. Research, therefore, helps generate new content. For example, in Breaking Bad, the protagonists need to make crystal meth, which involves a specific ingredient named methylamine. The writers could have easily stepped over this detail by just having them run into a gang member who gets it for them, but instead they sent Walt and Jesse on a side quest to steal a barrel of methylamine. This side plot would have never happened had the writers not done research on what meth actually consists of. It may take a bit of extra work, but it nearly always pays off in more credible storytelling that sets itself apart. Vince Gilligan knew this. He even stated that his curiosity towards the nitty-gritty of criminal activity stemmed from his noticing that other crime shows don't really delve into the details that come along with criminal operations, such as covering up murders and getting rid of bodies.
How do you go about the process of becoming a drug dealer? And you know, again, in movies, countless times, I've seen the guy kill another guy, and maybe there's some bad feelings about it afterward, but they pass pretty quickly. quickly because you got to get onto the next step of the plot. And to me, episode 2, we got to deal with these guys. When we could do a whole episode about how do you hide a body? Where do you go here and dig a hole, and then a guy comes along and you get spooked, so you fill in the hole and you drive away and you go to point B and point C. We thought about that, and then we thought, is there another way to get rid of a body? And certainly we wound up with acid. You don't want to slow your storytelling down, but rather you want to milk every bit of drama you can find within it.
But keep in mind that technical terms and fancy jargon can also make a character seem pretentious. The ultimate test for any expert is to explain complex information to a 4-year-old in a way even they could understand. Or better even, let them demonstrate the knowledge in action.
This is not myth.
Besides types of intelligence, there are a few easy and common techniques writers use to create the illusion of intelligence. The first is to make the character younger. We've seen this a million times. The child prodigy who for no particular reason excels in a specific magic system or other skill featured in the story. When using this technique, it's important to at least indicate how it can be that a character is so incredibly gifted. Maybe their parents used to be very intelligent people as well. Maybe they've been practicing a particular skill from a very young age because they had to. Maybe they have a particular character trait that gives them a high potential for a certain sport or field. Someone with natural patience and calm has a higher potential to become great at chess than someone who is short-tempered and aggressive. I like to identify the specific set of personality traits, physical prowess or a certain skill or intelligence requires, and see if my character naturally has those factors. Then my audience can see where the intellect stems from without my mentioning it.
See, Prince Zuko, a moment of quiet is good for your mental well-being.
The second common strategy is to contrast smart characters with less intelligent characters. However, dumbing down side characters doesn't necessarily make a smart character seem smart. It might just make every other character seem incredibly stupid, whereas the smart character just ends up with an average level of intelligence. So I would try to make the smart character only slightly smarter, without robbing other characters of their intellect. The third common strategy is making smart characters think faster. Simply have them come up with elaborate schemes or escape plans at a moment's notice. They say great minds think alike, but actually they increase each other's thinking speeds. Intelligence feeds off others' intelligence. Putting 5 teenagers in a room is far different from putting 5 experts in a room. Once their brains start running, they will only gain more momentum when exposed to other great minds and ideas. It can be fun to play with this by putting a rookie in a room full of experts and describe them struggling to keep up with all of the references and quick punchlines these geniuses come up with on the fly.
We catch Kira! I would never dream about living in a world without light.
Yes, that would be dark.
The fourth strategy I noticed to be used a lot is to make smart characters highly observant. They notice subtle differences, spot small errors, and pick up underlying patterns that are easily missed by other characters. These characters then use this knowledge to their advantage, such as small openings in fights or serving as human lie detectors during interrogations by picking up subtle cues in body language.
Skylar, it's charity.
Why do you say that like it's some sort of dirty word?
The fifth common technique is intuition. Things that aren't immediately noticeable to other characters might be very obvious to a smart character, even if they can't explain why.
Nice work, Sokka. How'd you do that?
Instinct?
Their hunches are often true, and other characters might even come to depend on a genius's instinct when there simply are no other options. And finally, the sixth common strategy is to make a smart character highly respected by their peers or enemies. People who are highly skilled or intelligent in a certain field make the thing they do seem easy. Therefore, it's often very difficult for laymen to understand how hard certain skills are to obtain. Only once you try something yourself can you judge how easy or hard a skill is to acquire. The problem with fiction is that sometimes the featured skills don't exist in real life, so even if we wanted to, we cannot try it ourselves. We don't, unfortunately, have bending in our world. We cannot transmutate things out of thin air. And the closest thing to using ODM gear would be to try bungee jumping. That's why this strategy is commonly used in stories that feature magic systems. The only way for us to judge the difficulty of a skill is by hearing experts comment on it. And if all those experts praise a certain individual, well, they must be very good at it. The only problem with using techniques I just mentioned is that we're telling the audience to believe they're smart, but we're not actually showing them this is true. We're not providing evidence for our audience to draw this conclusion themselves. Had we not been told that Itachi joined the Anbu at age 11, then there was actually more reason for us to believe that he's just as smart as the other characters. Had Watson not been a character that we can compare Sherlock's genius to, we probably would have been left confused on whether Sherlock is actually smarter than most people or whether he's just socially awkward. The previously mentioned techniques make the character dependent on delivered information and other characters rather than getting to prove it for themselves. That doesn't mean that these techniques can be considered obsolete. They can be used to enhance the evidence that's already delivered, but to make a character's genius believable, the evidence should be delivered before we give the audience additional information. When it comes to delivering evidence for our character's intelligence, it serves to exploit the few advantages we have as writers. One advantage is time. Whereas we can make it seem like our character solves a difficult problem in a split second, we can take our time in thinking up a clever solution. The fact that it takes us writers days to figure out a problem that the character then solves in seconds will automatically make the character seem smart. The second advantage is knowing the situation ahead of time. For our character, it's like taking an exam where external resources aren't allowed, so they have to draw from all of the knowledge they've acquired over time. But we as writers can easily look up the specific information we need online or in an encyclopedia. This advantage does, however, come with a catch. After all, to prevent breaking the illusion we've created, the piece of information does have to be consistent with how we've established the character. If a character is a communication specialist but doesn't know the first thing about mechanics, we can't just have them hotwire a car to make their escape. Unless we've established them to have this knowledge earlier on in the story. To make our characters smart when the situation calls for it, foreshadowing is our best friend.
Bolin, do the thing.
What thing?
The thing! I never had to tell Julie what thing.
I'm not Julie, okay? Pretend I don't know anything about anything that's happening here. Also, pretend I don't want to build a super weapon or get my hands blown off.
Lastly, I'd like to quickly point out that we should also consider who we make highly intelligent and what type of intelligence we give certain characters. This can be an interesting place to discover some unintentional biases. You know, stereotypes and harmful assumptions like Asians are good at math, women cannot be good accountants or architects, black people are always street smart and white people are always book smart, Indians make good doctors but terrible mechanics, things like that. All I'm gonna say here is, be smart about your smart characters. And on that note, thank you so much for sticking with me until the end. I learned a lot in the process of making this video and actually feel very motivated to apply this information to my own story. If you'd like to revisit the given information, maybe even print it to use while writing, you can find an adjusted version of the entire video script on my blog. If you're interested in the behind the scenes of this video, head over to my Ko-Fi to read all of my notes. And while you're waiting for the next video, you might want to follow me on Instagram, where I post daily bite-sized writing tips, fun prompts, and the occasional update on my personal work in progress. All links and resources are in the description. Once again, I hope this video provided you with the tools and inspiration you needed to do your smart characters and your story justice.